Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. So the poet is talking about counting till 12. Repetition of a sound in the beginning of the word in the same sentence. So that is called as alliteration. Consonance is the repetition of a consonant sound in a sentence. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Hello everyone. A very warm welcome to all the young minds of Class 12 Cbse. I am Dr. Shalini, your English teacher at Prep School. Today we are here to discuss one of the poems in your FLAMINGO textbook, that is Keeping Quiet. Yes, I am going to teach you how to keep quiet. Okay, so we'll understand what is there in this poem today. Okay, so in today's session, we'll be learning about the poet first, then we'll understand the summary of the poem along with literary devices and also the new words that are there. Okay, so then we'll understand the rhyme scheme. At last, we will move on to the theme of the poem. So let us begin with the introduction of the poet. Okay, so here's Ricardo Reyes Basalto. So it's very difficult for you to spell his name, pronounce his name, right? So his pen name is actually Pablo Neruda. Okay, so he used to write with his pen name only. So he was born in Chile, that is Parral, city of Chile, and his poems are actually very beautiful pictures of nature. He used to write it in a very easy language, so it is very easily understood by the readers. Okay, so he actually won a Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971. So you are reading a poem written by one of the Nobel laureates. So let us understand the meaning of this poem. So since he is a Nobel laureate, yes, it must be worth reading, isn't it? So let us move on to the summary of the poem. So let us start with the first stanza of this poem. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. So the poet is talking about counting till 12. Okay. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. So he's talking about keeping quiet as well as keeping still. We are not going to move our arms also. We are not going to speak in any language for that matter. Okay, so he's talking about counting till 12 and to stop talking, to be quiet. Okay, so we have few literary devices over here. Okay, we have the first one is assonance. Okay, as I told you before, assonance is the repetition of a vowel sound. Okay, consonance is the repetition of a consonant sound in a sentence. Okay, so this usually comes in poems only. Okay, so we have assonance here, that is repetition of O and E here. So where is it seen? Here you can see O and E is actually repeated. Okay, O, E, and again O is repeated and E also is repeated. So you can see many times it is repeated. Yes, you can see consonants also over here because it is W which is repeated, verse sound. Okay, so that is repeated. So consonants also can be counted here as a literary device. Okay. So next we have anaphora. So what is the meaning of anaphora? Anaphora is the repetition of two consecutive lines starting with the word let's. Okay, so if you repeat the same word in one sentence, it is called as repetition. If it is anaphora, it is repeated in consecutive lines. Okay, so here you can see it is repeated and such usage is called as anaphora. Okay, so had it been repeated in a single line, it would have been called as repetition. The literary device would be repetition, but here it is in consecutive lines, so it is called as anaphora. So these are the literary devices used in this stanza. There is no new word that can be seen in this stanza. Okay, so it is easily understood as the introduction given by me about the author, that is his language is easily understood, isn't it? It is very easily understood. Okay, so there is no new word there. So we'll move on to the next stanza now. Okay, so here it would be an exotic moment. So exotic meaning you already know, right? So it is some very new experience kind. Okay, so very enjoyable kind. Okay, so it would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. Without rush, without engines, there is no tension, there is no stress, there is no movement of vehicles. Without engines means there is no movement of vehicles. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness, isn't it? All of a sudden everything comes to a halt. That means it is very strange, right? So everybody has come to a halt, and that is very strange. So we'll all be together. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales. So he's talking about harming the living beings that are there in other parts of nature. Okay, so human being harming the nature, or human beings harming the beings in water. Okay, so marine beings. Okay, so he's talking about that. And the man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands. So he's talking about people coming back to themselves. Means when you come to a halt, when you stop troubling nature, you will have vision wherein you can know about yourself. Okay, so he will look at his hurt hands. Okay, so here in this stanza, the poet is talking about not harming the other living beings. Okay, so he's talking about not harming the whales. Okay, so fishermen harming the whales, and also he's talking about that. So indirectly he is giving a message that we should not harm the other living beings in nature. Okay, so let us have a look at the literary devices in this stanza. So we have alliteration here. You know alliteration, right? Repetition of a sound in the beginning of the word in the same sentence. So that is called as alliteration. So here you can see we would. So this is an alliteration. Okay, so let me just tell you, other than this, there are many other literary devices also. Okay, for example, repetition of vowel sounds, that is assonance, can be there. Repetition of consonant sounds, consonants also can be there. Okay, so this is an extra one I am giving. Assonance and consonants, you can just make a note of it by yourselves. Okay, so this is what is there in this stanza. Okay, so yes, let us move on to the next stanza now. Okay, so here is the third stanza. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. So what is the poet trying to tell over here? See, it has a profound meaning, isn't it? Those who prepare green wars. So he is talking about the war with nature. Okay, so wars with gas means a waste that is given to the nature. Okay, he's talking about wars with gas, the unwanted gas that is released to the nature. Wars with fire, he's talking about the missiles, he's talking about the bullets, bombs, all these. Okay, so the war that takes place with fire. Okay, so victory with no survivors. All this happen, then there is nobody who is surviving. Okay, yes, you might have won the war, but there is no survivor to look at your victory, isn't it? So there is no survivor to celebrate your victory. That kind of war it is. Would put on clean clothes. So that person who has won has put on clean clothes. He has won. He is celebrating the victory himself, by himself, isn't it? So he has put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers. He just goes around with whom he wants only. Okay, with his brothers. In the shade doing nothing. What does he do? He just walks around in the shade, walks around there around without doing anything. Okay, he has no work to do at all. Okay, he is totally inactive. Okay, what I want should not be confused. What I am wanting actually should not be confused with total inactivity. What you want is not doing nothing, isn't it? You must do something. You must be very active. Inactiveness leads to death again. Okay, so whatever you want should not lead to inactivity. Okay, so life is what it is about. This is what is called as life. It is all about doing something, not staying inactive. Okay, I want no truck with death. So the poet is telling that no truck with death means everywhere there are dead bodies, if at all there is war going on. Okay, so there should not be trucks with death. Okay, so everywhere there are dead bodies, so trucks should not be carrying that actually. Okay, so that is not what is called as victory. It is something wherein you be active and you are living harmoniously with the other beings of nature. So that is what the poet is trying to say over here. So here in this stanza, literary devices we have is that wars with, again alliteration can be seen there. Okay, so again clean cloths, that K sound is repeated. C is repeated. That means K sound is repeated. So that is alliteration. That is one of the literary devices. Then we have assonance. Here the use of O. Okay. So victory with no survivor. So many places it is repeated. Okay. So the literary device assonance can be found over here. And then we have the use of war. Okay. In the same line, as I said, let me go back to the previous slide. So here you can see wars is repeated. Okay, in the same line it is repeated, so it is called as repetition. That literary device is actually called as repetition. Okay, so that is the literary device that is found here. Okay, so in this stanza it is alliteration, assonance and repetition. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next stanza. Okay, if we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. So what does he tell over here? The poet calls the people as single-minded, means very narrow-minded. Okay, so about keeping our lives moving, our life has to keep on moving. That is why we are very narrow-minded. We have all become selfish is what the poet says. Okay, so we are concerned only about our life. We are not concerned about the life of those who are living next to us. Okay, our fellow beings. We are not concerned about our fellow beings. We are not living harmoniously with them. We are concerned only about us. We have become very selfish is what the poet tries to tell here. And for once could perhaps a huge silence means he is telling about keeping quiet, means if everything comes to a halt, if everything becomes quiet there, okay, so that huge silence will actually create a lot of change in us, okay, might interrupt this sadness. Like we are always active, now we have become very selfish and that's why we are very sad. Okay, for one moment if at all we are quiet, then we will understand ourselves. Then that gives lot of happiness. That puts an end to sadness what we are experiencing now. That is what the poet is trying to say in these 4 lines. Of never understanding ourselves, the sadness of never understanding ourselves. When we understand ourselves, we feel so happy, isn't it? You are understanding a person who is the most inspiring, isn't it? You understand about yourself, you'll be very happy that you know yourself, you know your body, you know your mind, how you can control yourself. Okay, so that actually gives you lot of happiness. Okay, so if at all we live harmoniously, we become more insightful, we can understand ourselves very well is what the poet is trying to tell over here. And of threatening ourselves with death. Okay, so this is also a sadness. We are always scared of death, isn't it? We are always scared of death. So that in the previous session also we saw how the fear of death causes lot of terror. It is not the death that causes fear, isn't it? Death is actually peaceful. The fear of death is more terrorizing is what William Douglas says in the lesson of your Flamingo, that is deep water. Isn't it? Same way here also. The fear of death actually keeps us very scared. That creates sadness. Okay. So that is what the poet is telling over here. Okay. So here we can see the literary device alliteration wherein W sound is repeated and the S sound is repeated. Okay. So this is alliteration, and the most important thing it is enjambment over here. Okay, enjambment I had told in one of your previous poems also. So here you can see, and for once could perhaps a huge silence. Here you can see the sentence is not complete over here. Okay, it has continued in the next sentence also. So this usage, okay, wherein the sentence doesn't complete in that line, it goes to the next line also. Okay, it goes to the next line, and there also it doesn't end, it goes to the next line. So such usage wherein the sentence doesn't end in that line, it continues to the next line in poems is called as enjambment. Okay, so that means it is a continuation. It is written in free verse is what the actual meaning is. So this is about the summary of this poem. Okay, so we have one more stanza here. Okay, so perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12 and you will keep quiet and I will go. Here is the interesting twist here. Perhaps the earth can teach us. Now he thinks earth can be a teacher for all of us. So how does he feel that? So as when everything seems dead. So just imagine when everything comes to a still and you just experience that, then it later becomes alive. Okay, so then later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12. Now the author says, now I'll count up to 12, then let me see how you behave. Once you have had that experience, okay, once you understand yourself, once you understand the importance of living harmoniously with others, let me count up to 12, then let me see how you behave. Okay, so that is what is the actual meaning here. And you will keep quiet and I will go. That means now it is high time for us to realize that it is very important for us to live in a harmonious way with the other living beings. We need to get into the way nature is. Okay, we need to live harmoniously with nature. It is high time for us to stop troubling nature, stop harming nature, stop harming the environment, stop polluting the environment. So that is what the poet is trying to tell over here. Once you have an experience, once you get to know the fear of death, once you experience the happiness you get when you understand yourself, okay, so you can live harmoniously, you can lead a proper life. So now when I count up to 12, you will be able to keep quiet. You have understood the importance of living harmoniously, you have understood the importance of not harming the environment, so then you will know how to live properly. So that is what the poet is giving us a message over here. Okay, so coming to the literary device, it is only assonance that is found here, that is T sound is repeated in the fourth line. Okay, count up to 12. This is assonance, and here you can also say this is an alliteration. Okay, so T sound is repeated in the beginning of the word. Okay, so T sound is repeated, so that is alliteration. Okay, so this is all about the summary. Coming to the rhyme scheme of this poem is actually written in free verse, means there are no rhyming words at all. Okay, so there are no rhyming words, you already saw there in the end of the sentence. Actually there are no rhyming words. In fact the sentence is not complete at all in that line, it goes to the next line also. So this happens when it is written in a free verse only. Okay, so it is written in free verse, and you can also notice that the length of the lines, okay, so the number of words used in a line is actually varied. Okay, so in the stanzas of the poem varies, that means the meter varies. Okay, METRE, it varies. Okay, so meter means number of words used in a sentence, in a line, in a poem. Okay, so that actually varies, the line length varies is what is the meaning of it. Okay, so we'll now move on to the last part, that is the theme of the poem. Okay, so this poem Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda, I'm using his pen name only because it is easy for us to say that word. Okay, so he discusses the need of maintaining peace and silence. So as I told you, the harmonious way of leading our life with our fellow beings on this earth. Okay, so he tells us about the importance of peace and silence. He stresses upon being quiet and harmless to the human beings. Yes, of course, he is talking about our fellow beings also. Okay, when it is war or so, we tend to destroy, we tend to harm the other living beings also. Not only the other living beings, but also human beings. Okay, so many people are killed when it is a war, right? So that also he tells is not permissible. Okay, so he tells us to be harmless to the human beings, animals, and the environment also. Okay, so the poet tells us how well we can maintain proper relationship with all these living beings. Okay, so he suggests that in order to maintain peace and harmony, what is required? It is actually we have to first stop and retrospect ourselves. Okay, so we have to introspect, means we have to understand ourselves in a better way. Okay, so we have become very selfish. Okay, introspection doesn't mean that we have to be selfish. Okay, so that is not the way of being introspective. Okay, being selfish is only my work has to be done, everything I only want. So this kind of mentality is called as being selfish. Okay, being very greedy. But introspecting is not like that. You understand yourself, you understand and you distinguish between your wants and needs. Okay, when you do this, you will be less harmful to the fellow beings. Okay, you will be very empathetic to your fellow beings. You will be very empathetic towards nature as well as your fellow beings, that is other human beings also. Okay, so that is what the message given by poet in this poem is. Okay, so hope you have all understood this poem. You will be more empathetic towards other beings and more introspective towards yourself. Okay, so yes, I would want you to go through the poem, understand it better. However, stanza by stanza summary is already told to you. I would like you to watch the lecture, then go back to the poem and read it again. Okay, so let us come back with another lesson from your vistas. Okay, so take care. Come with your book and a pencil when you come to the next class. And yes, most importantly, I would want you to watch the video lecture and also read the poem and come back. So let us meet again in our live class. Okay, so take care, keep learning till I meet next. Bye bye.